My sinful family made me feel like I was worthless, but still took my labor for free. Have you ever been betrayed by the people you thought you could trust the most? In this video, we dive deep into Alex's journey of realizing the painful truth about his sinful family. What happens when a family you've worked for, trusted, and loved turns out to be nothing but manipulators? Watch as Alex takes a stand and uncovers the truth about the toxic actions of his sinful family. If you relate to Alex's struggle or find his story empowering, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to Silent Wars for more inspiring content. Growing up, I often felt like the outsider in my own family. While my cousins and siblings proudly boasted about their shiny cars, weekend parties, and extravagant vacations, I was the quiet one who preferred staying in, reading, and working on my future. My name is Alex, and unlike everyone else, I wasn't interested in impressing anyone or conforming to their expectations. I had my own dreams and aspirations, and I was determined to carve my own path, one that didn't rely on family approval or the pursuit of material success. As a child, I never felt the need to keep up with my relatives. Their focus was always on appearances, on buying the latest gadgets, driving the flashiest cars, and living a lifestyle that was all about impressing others. Meanwhile, I found fulfillment in learning, in improving myself, and in creating a future that I could be proud of, regardless of what others thought. I didn't need validation from my family, or anyone for that matter. My goal was always to create something meaningful, not just for me, but for the world. I spent countless hours working towards that goal, late nights, early mornings, and sacrificing personal time to build something solid. The effort I put in paid off, and eventually, I found success. Slowly but surely, I carved out a life that was both financially and emotionally fulfilling. But as I began to achieve my goals, something became painfully clear to me. My family didn't care about my accomplishments. They didn't acknowledge the hours I worked, the sacrifices I made, or the obstacles I overcame. Instead, it became evident that they were only interested in one thing: what they could get from me. It wasn't long before they saw an opportunity to benefit from my success. They didn't celebrate it or acknowledge it as a personal victory. Instead, they viewed it as something that could be used to their advantage. At first, it was subtle, small requests for help here and there. But soon enough, I found myself being taken for granted, treated as if my success was something they could casually dip into whenever it was convenient for them. It was a harsh realization. Despite all I had done to achieve my success, I was still just seen as a means to an end, a tool to fulfill their desires, not a person with my own dreams. This experience taught me an important lesson sometimes. The people who are supposed to love and support you can be the same ones who take advantage of your success. It made me rethink everything I had believed about family and the kind of relationships I wanted to maintain. My parents, Mark and Claire, ran a small family-owned restaurant in Denver, Colorado. It was a cozy, welcoming place, the kind that locals loved, and it had been passed down from my grandfather. For as long as I could remember, they talked about expanding it, dreaming of making it bigger and more successful. They envisioned a business that we, their children, could inherit one day, a legacy that would carry on for generations. They had big dreams for the restaurant, and I wanted to be a part of that future. When I graduated from college, they offered me a position at the restaurant. It wasn't glamorous or well-paid, but I was eager to prove myself and contribute to something that meant so much to our family. My older sister, Sarah, had been working at the restaurant for years. She had always been the golden child in the family, the one who seemed to have it all figured out. She had a nice car, lived in a spacious apartment, and appeared financially comfortable. From the outside, it seemed like she was doing well, and I naturally assumed she was getting paid well for all her hard work. She was always busy with the business, often seen as the one who took charge, and I thought it was just a matter of time before we both shared the benefits of the success we were helping to build. As I started working there, I quickly became aware of the dynamics at play. I was focused on doing my job well. Long shifts, late nights, and weekends were the norm for me. I believed that one day, after paying my dues, I would inherit a piece of the business. My parents had always spoken about passing it down to us, and it felt like the natural progression. I assumed everything was fair, that all of us, Sarah, my parents, and me, would have equal shares in the restaurant, and that we would work together to grow it into something greater. But that assumption, I now realize, was my biggest mistake. What I didn't know was that behind closed doors, my parents had already made decisions that would leave me out of the equation. They had been paying Sarah a salary all along, one that allowed her to live comfortably, while I was left doing most of the hard work without any acknowledgement or compensation. In my naivety, I thought I was working my way up, earning my spot in the family business, but the truth was far more complicated and much more unfair. The more I worked, the more I began to notice the discrepancies. My sister was treated as the heir apparent to the restaurant, while I was just another employee, an expendable one at that. It was clear that the dream I had about inheriting the business one day was just that, a dream. It became apparent that the future my parents had envisioned wasn't one where all of us had an equal stake in the family business. Instead, it was a future where Sarah would benefit, and I would be left behind. This painful realization made me question everything I had believed about family, fairness, and the value of hard work. Months passed, and I poured everything into the restaurant. I worked late nights, early mornings, and weekends running errands, always going above and beyond. I was determined to prove myself, thinking that all the hard work would eventually pay off. I imagined that one day, the restaurant would be mine too, that my parents would see my dedication and reward me with a share in the business. After all, I had been helping them build it from the ground up. But one day, everything changed. It all started when I overheard my sister Sarah talking on the phone. I had just returned from running errands and was about to head upstairs when I heard her laughing from the living room. Curious, I stopped to listen. "Yeah, Mom and Dad just sent it over," she said casually, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Can you believe it? So much for struggling at work, huh?" The words hit me like a punch in the gut. Sent it over? My heart dropped. What payment? I stood frozen for a moment, trying to make sense of what I had just heard. Was it a bonus or some kind of family contribution? My mind raced with questions. I brushed it off at first, telling myself it could just be a one-time thing. Maybe it was just a gift or a loan, nothing to get upset about. But as the night went on, I couldn't shake the thought. What did she mean by so much for struggling at work? Was she talking about the payments she had been receiving from our parents? Money that I had never seen? Why was she getting paid while I was working long hours without any kind of compensation? Something didn't add up. Later that evening, I decided to confront my parents. I wasn't expecting a fight, just a simple conversation. I casually asked my mom about the payment Sarah had mentioned. I was hoping for some clarity, but instead, my mom brushed me off with a laugh. "Oh, Alex, family doesn't work for money. We help each other out," she said nonchalantly, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. I stood there, stunned. Her response made no sense. If family didn't work for money, why was Sarah receiving payments while I was doing the same work without any recognition or pay? I wanted to press the issue, to demand an explanation, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I walked away, my mind reeling with disbelief. The unfairness of it all hit me hard. For months, I had been sacrificing my time and energy, believing that I was building something for myself, only to discover that I was being taken advantage of. The dream of inheriting the business felt more and more like a fantasy. The moment everything snapped was unexpected, but it felt inevitable. I had spent countless hours, months, and even years dedicated to this family business, believing I was contributing to something that would eventually be mine. Instead, I realized the harsh truth. They had been using me all along. My work, my sacrifices, my sleepless nights, it had all been for nothing. I was nothing more than free labor, while my sister Sarah got everything handed to her. She never had to work hard like I did. She was rewarded with money and privileges, while I got nothing but more work and empty promises. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't stay in that toxic environment anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when I knew deep down that I was being mistreated. I had given my all to this business, and for what? The disrespect, the lack of recognition, it had all become too much. I had been taken for granted for far too long, and I finally reached my breaking point. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of finality. I couldn't put it off any longer. I walked into the office where my dad, Mark, was sitting at his desk, completely absorbed in his work. I stood in front of him for a moment, watching him type away, and then I placed my resignation letter on his desk. It was short and to the point, but it carried years of frustration and disappointment. He barely even looked up from his computer when he saw the letter. "Don't be dramatic," he muttered, his voice barely audible. But it was too late for that. I wasn't going to stand there and continue playing the role of the dutiful, overlooked child. "I'm leaving," I said firmly, standing my ground. The shock on his face was priceless. He froze for a moment, as if he couldn't comprehend what I had just said. But I didn't give him the chance to process it. I turned and walked away without another word, feeling a sense of empowerment with each step I took. The weight that had been pressing on me for so long lifted, and for the first time in years, I felt free. It was the hardest decision I'd ever made, but it was also the most freeing. I knew that walking away from the family business meant leaving behind everything I had worked for, but I also knew that staying meant continuing to be exploited. I chose myself. I chose to walk away from the toxic environment that had kept me chained for so long, and in that moment, I finally felt like I had control over my life again. The first few days after I left the family business were filled with uncertainty. No job, no income, and no clear direction. But strangely, I didn't feel the panic that most people would experience in that situation. Instead, I felt a sense of relief, almost like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control of my own life, and that made all the difference. I had walked away from a situation where I was undervalued, underpaid, and taken for granted, and now I had the freedom to make my own choices. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that whatever it was better than staying in a toxic environment. It was around that time that something unexpected happened. I received a message from an old colleague who had worked at my parents' company before quitting due to frustration. "Hey, I heard you left. Good for you. But you might want to check the company's finances. Something's off," the message read. I was immediately intrigued. I hadn't expected anyone to be looking out for me, especially not from my old workplace. Curiosity got the better of me, so I decided to take a closer look into the company's financial records. What I found was nothing short of shocking. The numbers didn't add up. There were massive payments labeled as consulting fees and special allowances, but the recipients of these payments weren't who they should have been. My sister Sarah had been receiving payments that were meant for me, and what's worse, some of these transactions were under my name. I stared at the screen, unable to believe what I was seeing. My family, the very people I trusted, had been using my name to funnel money into Sarah's account for years. The amounts were far more than what should have been going to her as a salary, And the fact that they had been doing this for so long was nothing short of betrayal. I sat there for what felt like hours, processing the information. I had always known something wasn't right, but this was beyond what I could have imagined. The company I had worked for and believed in, the business my parents had built, was now the source of my family's manipulation and deceit. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but now I knew the truth. They had used me for my name, for my hard work, and for their own benefit. The realization hit me hard, but it also gave me clarity. This wasn't just about me walking away from a job. This was about exposing the lies and the injustice that had been going on right under my nose, and I wasn't about to let them get away with it. Once I had pieced together the horrifying truth about my family's betrayal, I knew I couldn't let it slide. It wasn't just about the money they had stolen from me. It was about the principle. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had a responsibility not just to myself, but to everyone who had been hurt by this kind of deceit. This wasn't a small misunderstanding or a petty family squabble. No, this was fraud, and it was time for justice. I started by reaching out to a former accountant who had worked for my parents' business. This wasn't just anyone I trusted him, and he had been one of the few employees who had left because of shady practices. When I explained the situation, he didn't hesitate to confirm what I had suspected. This was embezzlement. The payments that had been funneled through my name and into Sarah's account weren't just a mistake or oversight. They were deliberate actions designed to steal from me. Next, I contacted a lawyer. At first, I wasn't sure what to expect. I wasn't even sure I had a case. But when I explained the details and showed him the evidence, he assured me that I had a solid legal case. He explained that I wasn't just entitled to recover the money that had been stolen from me. This was a serious crime. My family hadn't just robbed me of my earnings, they had committed criminal fraud, and there would be consequences for that. I felt a small sense of relief hearing those words, but I also knew this was just the beginning. This wasn't just about getting my money back. No, it was bigger than that. This was about holding my family accountable for their actions. For too long, they had taken advantage of me, manipulated me, and used me as a pawn in their games. They thought they could get away with it because they were family. They thought they could hide behind their blood ties, assuming that I would never stand up to them. But they were wrong. I had been the one who had worked tirelessly for their business, and all I had received in return was disrespect and exploitation. Now, I wasn't going to let them off the hook so easily. I was going to make sure that they paid for what they had done financially and in the eyes of the law. This wasn't just about my personal revenge, it was about making sure they understood that their actions had real consequences. The moment I decided to pursue legal action, I knew I was not only fighting for what was mine, but for justice. And this time, I wasn't backing down. It had been days since I uncovered the truth about the fraudulent payments and my family's manipulation. My heart pounded as I made the decision to confront them. I couldn't let them get away with it any longer, and I knew I had the evidence to expose their lies. It was time to stop playing by their rules and make them face the consequences of their actions. When I walked through the front door of the house, the familiar hum of the TV greeted me. My parents were sitting together on the couch, absorbed in whatever show they were watching. Sarah, of course, was there too, sitting next to them with that smug, satisfied look on her face, the same look she always wore when she thought she had won. It made my blood boil. For years, I had been the one ignored, the one used, while she sat back and enjoyed the benefits of being my parents' favorite. I took a deep breath and walked into the living room. My parents didn't even look up from the TV when I sat down across from them, but I could feel the tension in the room building. It was almost as if they knew what was coming. I cleared my throat, then casually said, "I've been going through the company's finances. Found something interesting." My mom's eyes flickered for just a second, and my dad's grip on the remote tightened. They both exchanged a quick glance, but neither of them said anything. I knew they were already scrambling to think of a way to cover their tracks. They didn't know what I had found yet, but I wasn't going to give them the chance to deny it. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and opened the files. The silence in the room was deafening as I showed them the screenshots, the undeniable proof of the payments made under my name, the money that had been funneled directly into Sarah's account. I watched as their faces drained of color, their smug expressions slipping into shock and guilt. "I thought we were a family," I said, my voice steady but full of the anger I had been holding back for so long. "But what you've done here isn't just betrayal. It's theft." My dad's face turned red, his mouth opening and closing, struggling to come up with an excuse. Sarah, sitting there in stunned silence, finally broke the silence with a nervous laugh, but it was hollow. She knew she had been caught. At that moment, I could see the truth in their eyes. They had no more excuses. The game was over. And for the first time, I had the upper hand. The fallout. The silence in the room was so thick, I could almost hear my own heartbeat. My father, usually so quick to react, sat motionless, his face tightening with each passing second. My mom, ever the peacemaker, tried to brush it off. "It's not what you think, Alex," she said, but her voice trembled with uncertainty. The words sounded empty, hollow even. I could see the panic in their eyes, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for it. They had caused this mess, and now it was their turn to face the consequences. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. The proof was right there in front of them, screenshots of their deceit. Money moved behind my back, their lies laid bare. I had done everything for them for so many years. I had worked tirelessly in their business, only to be treated like I didn't matter. But this was the last straw. The days that followed were a whirlwind. My parents bombarded me with phone calls, text messages, and visits. They begged me to come back, to fix things, to forget the betrayal and let them get away with it. They told me they didn't mean it, that they didn't understand what had gone wrong. But I stood firm as I'd ever been in my life. I had had enough. They had broken me, and I wasn't about to let them fix it with empty promises. I contacted my lawyer, filing a lawsuit against their business for fraud and financial misconduct. The legal process was grueling, but necessary. I wasn't going to let them escape unscathed. As soon as the lawsuit went public, the fallout was immediate. The business that had once been their pride and joy started to crumble. Clients began leaving, one by one. The phone calls from longtime partners stopped coming, replaced by apologies and complaints. Investors pulled out, citing the scandal that had now tarnished the company's reputation beyond repair. Their once thriving business was now a sinking ship, and I was the one holding the proverbial iceberg. The pressure mounted as the company came under investigation. The authorities were combing through the financial records, and my parents could no longer deny what they had done. They had tried to protect their empire, but in the end, it was their own greed and dishonesty that destroyed it. I felt no satisfaction in watching them lose everything. It wasn't about revenge for me. It was about justice. They had thought they could get away with it, that their position as my parents would allow them to manipulate me forever. But I had finally taken a stand. I had stopped being their puppet, stopped letting them use me as a tool to fund their mistakes. Now, as their business fell apart and their financial world collapsed, I could finally move on. I had the freedom I had longed for, freedom from the guilt, the manipulation, and the constant feeling of being unappreciated. I had made a choice, and for the first time, it felt like the right one. A week had passed since everything had changed, but it felt like a lifetime. The weight of the decisions I had made settled deeper into my chest with each day. I was no longer the person who would quietly accept being pushed aside, the one who took on the responsibilities no one else wanted. For the first time, I had done something for myself, and it felt like a victory, though not without a cost. Then, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but a part of me already knew who it was. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering, a lump forming in my throat. My mom's voice cracked immediately when she spoke. "Alex, please, we need you," she cried, her voice barely audible through her sobs. "We're losing everything. The company. It's falling apart. Your father can't handle this, and neither can I. Please, help us. We can't fix this without you." For a second, my heart broke. I wanted to help her. I wanted to forgive them all. The guilt, the years of frustration, all flooded back at once. But then I remembered everything they had done. I remembered how I had been nothing more than free labor for their business, how they had ignored me and pushed me to the side for years, all while giving my sister everything she could ever want. They had stolen from me, used me, and then discarded me like I was nothing. Now, when the truth was out, and they were facing the consequences of their actions, they wanted my help. The unfairness of it all hit me like a tidal wave. The relief I had felt when I walked away from their toxic environment was undeniable. But now, faced with my mother's pleading, it stirred something else in me: anger. They had taken advantage of me for so long, and now they were asking me to fix everything? I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts, and then spoke in the coldest tone I could manage. "I'm not coming back," I said firmly. "You made your bed. Now you lie in it." I could almost hear her gasp on the other end of the line, the shock in her silence so palpable I could feel it through the phone. I didn't wait for her response. I didn't need to hear it. I had already made up my mind. For once in my life, I wasn't going to let guilt, family pressure, or their manipulations bring me back into their world of lies. I hung up the phone, the finality of my decision settling in. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. The days following my decision felt surreal. I had made the hard choice to walk away, to sever ties with the family that had used me for so long. But now, as the dust settled, I could see the true consequences of their actions unfold in real time. The company went bankrupt. It wasn't just a financial loss for my parents. It was the collapse of everything they had worked for, everything they had built over the years. The proud family business they had always hoped would be handed down to us was now gone. In an instant, they were forced to sell their assets, their dreams, their hard-earned savings, all crumbling in front of them. The life they had built from the ground up was shattered. For my sister Sarah, the reality was just as harsh. She had lived a life of comfort, surrounded by the luxuries that came with the company's success. But when everything fell apart, she couldn't escape the consequences of her own actions. The lavish lifestyle she thought would never end came crashing down. The expensive apartment, the fancy vacations, the shiny car, none of it mattered when the money was gone. She was forced to face the consequences of the very decisions that had once seemed so carefree. As for me, I walked away from the wreckage, feeling a sense of calm I had never known. I didn't regret my decision, not for a second. I had done what was necessary to protect myself, to stop being a pawn in their toxic game. The business, the family, the lies, they were no longer my responsibility. I had taken control of my life, and that was all that mattered. The most important lesson I learned from all of this was that sometimes the hardest thing you can do is walk away from family. No one, not even your parents or siblings, has the right to use you. Family is meant to support you, not drain you. It took me a long time to realize that I didn't owe them anything, not my time, not my effort, and certainly not my money. If walking away was what it took to protect myself, then that was what I had to do. In the end, I found peace. Not just peace from the chaos they had created, but peace within myself, knowing that I had made the right decision. It was time to move on, to build a life where I was valued for who I was, not for what I could provide. And with that, I knew I was free. Life can often test our patience and resilience, especially when it comes to family. While family bonds are meant to offer support and love, sometimes we find ourselves being taken for granted or used. The important lesson here is that self-respect is crucial, and it's okay to walk away from toxic relationships even if they're with family. Throughout life, we give so much of ourselves, and it's natural to want to care for others, but we must remember that we also need to protect our own well-being. Boundaries are essential for maintaining a healthy relationship with ourselves and others. At any stage in life, it's never too late to take control and make decisions that prioritize your peace of mind. You are worthy of respect, love, and care, and no one should ever take advantage of your kindness. Even when it seems like a hard choice, stepping away can lead to growth, healing, and the freedom to live a life that reflects your values. Family is important, but not at the cost of your own happiness. Taking control of your own life can bring a profound sense of relief and peace, and in the end, it is the best gift you can give yourself. Thank you so much for watching. I hope Alex's story resonated with you, and you've learned something about standing up for yourself in the face of betrayal. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Silent Wars for more real-life stories, inspiration, and empowering content. Stay tuned for our next video. See you soon.